Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruchak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, continuing from where we left off, the 16th chapter. And in this chapter, we start to see more of the ending of the Northern Kingdom. And when I say that, I mean to them as a kingdom, a united kingdom in the land of Israel, right? As we'll start to see the deportation, the mass deportation of the Northern Kingdom out of their land, and the importation of heathens into that land. All right, so there's a couple of things to go into in this chapter, a bit of secular information as well. Pretty interesting stuff here from extra biblical sources here, but those willing to be an edifying lesson. So this is 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And Hoshea was the last king of the northern kingdom before they got taken out of that land. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh, not as the kings of Israel that were before him, meaning, and this being Hoshea. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And this Shalmaneser was Shalmaneser the fifth, which is documented or reported to be the son of Tiglath-Pileser the third that we read about in the previous chapter. So at this point, after Tiglath-Pileser is, he dies, right, and he's gone, his son Shalmaneser the fifth takes over, and so remember that Hoshea subjected himself and paid this whole bunch of money to Tiglath to ensure the kingdom in his hands. So having the son of Tiglath, Shalmaneser, it was like a transfer of power, right, in terms of the Assyrian ruler or the Assyrian king. And so, as it says, Hoshea was now a servant or subject to paying tribute, you would say, to Shalmaneser, right? And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. And so in here, as we'll get the actual sources on this, after some time of paying tribute to the Assyrians, Hoshea ends up conspiring, right, with Egypt and rebelling, right, by stopping the tribute and thinking that he would be able to rebel with the help of Egypt and maybe some other neighboring nations to break free from the hand of the Assyrians. And this is why it mentions the king of Assyria finding conspiracy in him. And so by not bringing any more presents, he stopped paying tribute. And the king of Assyria came against Israel. And in doing so, Hoshea ends up getting, taken, bound up, and thrown in prison, right, as we read over here. And so I'm going to pause here and jump into some information here. I have some information here, first starting with Shalmaneser the fifth, right, the man in the subject over here in 2 Kings 17, in these first chapters, in these first verses, actually. So Shalmaneser the fifth, who was he, right? Shalmaneser the fifth, meaning Salmanu, is foremost, was the king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, right? And that's something to keep in mind. It's referred to as Neo, meaning new Assyrian Empire, because there was a previous Assyrian Empire, right, prior to this one. So there's a distinction between Neo-Assyrian Empire and the ones that came before it, and that's due to the fact of the Assyrians rising up into power within that region for a period of time, right, and then being taken down and then coming back up again. similar to how you have the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? Anyway, he was the king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 727 BC to his deposition and death in 722 BC, so about 5 years, give or take. Though Shalmaneser V's brief reign is poorly known from contemporary sources, he remains known for the conquest of Samaria, the capital of the Northern Kingdom, and the fall of the Kingdom of Israel, though the conclusion of that campaign is sometimes attributed to his successor, Sargon II, instead. Now, Sargon II, there's mixed information about him. Some sources say that he was the brother of Shalmaneser V, who ended up completing the campaign or the siege against Israel. Because what ended up happening, Shalmaneser V came in and besieged Israel, right, for about 3 years. And then after that, after the siege was over, the Assyrians got the upper hand. They ended up breaking through and then deporting the bulk of the Northern Kingdom into the lands in Assyria, and then importing heathens into the land of Samaria and the territory of Israel. Some sources say that Shalmaneser V died towards the end of this campaign, and therefore this campaign was completed by his successor, aka his brother, Sargon II. Some other sources say that no, that wasn't the case. Shalmaneser V completed it all. And some other sources say Sargon II maybe wasn't really his actual brother, but he was like a usurper who this was a common pattern you would see with usurpers. They would usurp the throne and then try to paint the picture or the narrative of being related to the royal line some way, shape, or form to increase validity of their reign. So, who knows? But that's not the focus here, so it's not really that important for us, at least in terms of what we care about. So Shalmaneser V is known to have campaigned extensively in the lands west of the Assyrian heartland. So that would be, if we look at here, the Assyrian Empire. And I say this, and I always, I keep saying this, but it's definitely good practice to visualize these different regions as you look at them. It gives you a better sense. You improve your geographical knowledge, because that's also important too. So we have a lot of points on here, but we can see both of these are part of the Assyrian Empire, just at different time periods and how they expanded. So we can see here, we have the Euphrates River, right here, and the Tigris here. And we have Babylon over here, and we have Ashur here, which was one of the capital, you could say. So this would be the heartland or the mainland of the Assyrian Empire, right around here. And westward, as we're reading, would be coming towards Syria, down towards the Levant, right, towards Anatolia or Asia Minor, which is over here at this time, and down towards Egypt. All this area is west, which they ended up conquering anyway. So going back, it says here, he campaigned extensively in the lands west of the Assyrian heartland, warring not only against the Israelites, but also against the Phoenician city-states and against kingdoms in Anatolia, which is another name for Asia Minor, today known as modern-day Turkey, or that region. Though he successfully annexed some lands to the Assyrian Empire, his campaigns resulted in long and drawn-out sieges lasting several years, some being unresolved at the end of his reign. The circumstances of his deposition and death are not clear, though they were likely violent, and it is unlikely that Sargon II was his legitimate heir. It is possible that Sargon II was entirely unrelated, which would make Shalmaneser V the final king of the Abbasid dynasty, which had ruled Assyria for almost 1,000 years. Cool. This part here is just more information about him. Cool, but not really something we care too much about. What we do care about a bit more is here the conquest of Samaria. So, reading the conquest of Samaria and Western wars, right? The city of Samaria, capital of the kingdom of Israel, was besieged and captured by the Assyrians in the 720s BC. This was during the reign of Hoshea, king of Israel, that we're reading of in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. The city's fall ended the kingdom of Israel, which became the Assyrian province of Samarina. On the aftermath of the conquest, nearly 30,000 people were deported, these people being Israelites, and resettled across the Assyrian Empire, and we'll read that in the scriptures as well, as per the standard Assyrian way of dealing with defeated enemy peoples through resettlement. And this was a tactic that the Assyrians used, right? Not only were they very brutal, but they also used this like resettlement, this deportation and importation and so on. So what they would do is, you get conquered, they are going to take you out of your land and put you in a foreign land. They're going to put the people from a different area into your land. So the treatment is happening to everybody, right? And what's the goal? What's the purpose of that? Well, one, you've been defeated, but, for good measure, you're now in a foreign land. You don't know the terrain. You don't know the people. You don't really know too much. So if you wanted to rebel, it would be much more difficult for you to do that because you're now in a foreign land. You don't have the advantage of, homeland, the homeland advantage, so to speak. So this is one of the the tactics that they used. Anyway, this specific resettlement is the basis of the narrative of the 10 lost tribes, right? To say that, well, they were taken away from their land. Where did they end up? Who are they today? Did they just lose? Some claims say that they just sort of, mingled with other nations, and then boom, they no longer exist anymore. But according to the scriptures, we know that's not the case. They're still here today. Anyway, there exists some debate as to whether the Assyrian king who captured Samaria was Shalmaneser V or Sargon II. Both the Babylonian Chronicle and the Bible, which we're reading, 2 Kings 17, clearly ascribe the city's conquest to Shalmaneser. The Bible records a siege lasting 3 years, but Sargon claims in several of his inscriptions that he was the one who conquered it. Various explanations have been proposed for the contradiction. So, once again, people have been trying to explain, oh, it was this guy. Oh, maybe it was this guy. Oh, no, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, the popular history author Susan Wise Bauer, isn't that an interesting name? Bauer, wrote in 2007 that Sargon might have finished the siege, which had now been slow, inefficient, and still ongoing at the time of Shalmaneser's death. Keiko Yamada and Shigeo Yamada wrote in 2017 that the explicit attribution of the city's capture to Shalmaneser by both the Babylonians and the Bible means that it is likely that the event took place in his reign. So remember, right? These were documentations by different peoples about what was happening at this time. Today, right? This year, right? Say Trump got sworn in. He was elected president after Biden. There are U.S. articles and sources and documentation of that. Guess what? In India, there's probably some documentation of that as well. Which is to say, like, imagine Trump goes and does something crazy. Well, they're just saying now that he said that the U.S. is now going to own the Gaza Strip. Say they go ahead with that, right? That's going to be documented. Even though they're in a foreign land, different countries around the world would have documentation. They would report it on their news sites that, hey, the U.S. president has now made the attempt or the claim of taking over the Gaza Strip. So you'd have multiple records of this event from different perspectives. Some might say it's a good thing, some might say it's a bad thing, some might say yada yada. And it's similar to what we're reading about here, right? The Babylonians, they were, they had records of this, similar to how we were reading of our records in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter of this event. And so what these guys, right, Keiko Yamada and Shigeo Yamada are saying is that hey, you have two sources here that are confirming this same event and attributing it to Shalmaneser. So it must have been him who completed the siege. Their reconstruction of events placed the beginning of the siege in 725 or 724 BC and its resolution in 722 BC near the end of Shalmaneser's reign, and believe that Sargon's inscriptions relating to Samaria may be referencing another incident in which Sargon was forced to put down a large revolt in Syria, which involved the population of Samaria, so on and so forth. I think we've got about enough information here as to what we needed here. So this is just some information about Shalmaneser V, some of the things he did, and they tell you about his conquest of the kingdom of Israel or Samaria, which we're reading of in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. So next I looked up Hosea or Hoshea. All right, as you can see, Hoshea was the 19th and last king of the northern kingdom of Israel and son of Elah or Elah. So his date reigned from 732 to 721, which overlaps with the time period of Shalmaneser's campaign against Israel. So here we go, right? Ascension. Assyrian records confirm the biblical account of how he became king under Ahaz, right? Or under Ahaz, which is the next sentence, but Assyrian records confirm the biblical account. So this is an example of extra biblical information, which is substantiating, not that we needed to, but it is nonetheless showing you, hey, yeah, what you read about in the Bible, yes, we have records of that because we were involved in it, and the people who wrote the Bible, right, or wrote that account in the scriptures were involved in it. And so this is our account of it. This is their account of it. We're talking about the same thing here from different perspectives. Once again, because you have individuals that will say, oh, the Bible, this was written by man. It's not real. It's just fables. But how do you explain the external accounts of the same events, same people, same names, confirming these events to be real? And how are these events found, right? How do they find these extra biblical sources? Inscriptions, right? Archaeological finds, tokens, through these different excavations. Anyway, under Ahaz, Judah had rendered alliance to Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria. When the northern kingdom under Pekah, in league with Rezin of Aram Damascus, had attempted to coerce the Judean king into joint action against Assyria, well, in the scriptures it's referred to as how they came and laid siege, right, to the southern kingdom when Ahaz was king. Hoshea, a captain in Pekah's own army, placed himself at the head of the Assyrian party in Samaria. He then removed Pekah by assassination, meaning he took him out. Tiglath-Pileser rewarded Hoshea by making him king over Ephraim, a name used here for the entire northern kingdom, which had been reduced to smaller dimensions. Now, the key part here, right? An undated inscription of Tiglath-Pileser III inscription boasts of making Hoshea king after his predecessor had been overthrown. And this is the inscription here translated for us. Israel, literally as Omri house when you translate it, and it was worded as Bit Humria when translated into English as Omri house, or the house of Omri, overthrew their king Pekah, or Pa-Qua-Ha. And I, remember this is from the perspective of Tiglath-Pileser III, an Assyrian king, and I placed Hoshea, or Ausi, as king over them. I received of them 10 talents of gold, 1,000, meaning this is approximation, talents of silver as their tribute, and brought them to Assyria. The amount of tribute exacted from Hoshea is not stated in scripture, but Menahem, about 10 years previously, was required to pay 1,000 talents of silver to Tiglath-Pileser in order to strengthen his hold on the kingdom, apparently against Menahem's rival Pekah. So yeah, going back to be clear, this Hoshea did basically, as we're reading here, he was strengthened right there. His hold on the kingdom was strengthened by Tiglath-Pileser. But you also had Menahem, who was the one who actually paid the tribute or the money to Tiglath-Pileser, which is that 1,000 talents of silver in 2 Kings, the 15th chapter. And we went through that at that point. Cool. Now, so this is some information about Hoshea. This is some information about Shalmaneser V. Now, specifically dealing with this inscription here, right? I pulled up some information here about it. And this is BibleArchaeologyReport.com. And we have King Hoshea, an archaeological biography. And what I'll do is I'll leave the link for this as a comment right in this video, and you can access it if you want. But you have some accounts here of archaeological finds proving the existence of this King Hoshea that we're reading about. Now, the first one here is going into a seal of one of his servants. Not too interested in that. You can read about that if you want. What I am interested in here is Hoshea and Tiglath-Pileser III, what we sort of read a glimpse of in on this wiki about Hoshea. So this was an inscription that was actually found, right? It was discovered, excavated, an inscription by Tiglath-Pileser III. And you can see this is the image here, and this is in looks like some ancient language, and we can get into that in a second. But it says here, actually let's discuss that now, right? So you might look at this and you might say, wait a minute, what the hell is this? How like in the modern day we speak English. Yeah, there's like Spanish and Arabic and different language out there, but none of us really spoke or used this language or these symbols for communications, right? Hieroglyphs and all that. None of us really used that. So how were they actually able to interpret this if nobody speaks this language today? How do you then say this character means this or this means that in English or in what language to translate it? And this goes back to the Rosetta Stone, right? If you look up here, if you're not familiar with it, Rosetta Stone, or let me actually look here. What is the Rosetta Stone? Egypt. Cool. So this would be a quick info about the Rosetta Stone, and it'll explain to you or answer the question of what I just said there. So it says the Rosetta Stone is a broken piece of a large stone slab that contains a decree written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and ancient Greek. It's one of the most famous objects in the British Museum. Why is this important, and why does this matter? The reason this matters is because having this inscription saying the same thing in 3 different languages, and one of them happening to be ancient Greek. Ancient Greek is a more modern language than the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? Or this Demotic, whatever language that was. But by having this written also in a more modern language, which is, has been passed down, right? And it's easier to understand. People still speak ancient Greek today, right? And they understand it. So that is what allowed them to learn more ancient or study more ancient languages. To say, okay, I understand Greek, right? If I understand Greek, and this took extensive studying and a good deal of approximation and inferences, but if I understand Greek and this is written in Greek Demotic and hieroglyphic symbols, I can then use the Greek to sort of translate and match, try to do a comparison between the passage written in, say, ancient hieroglyphs and the passage written in ancient Greek. They're saying the same thing. So I know the first sentence, even though I don't understand the hieroglyphs, I know that the first sentence represents whatever it says in ancient Greek, right? So imagine like you find, let me simplify this. You found a stone tablet and it said, hola, right? Hola, hello, and shalom, for example, right? And let's just assume, let's just go with it, and let's say all of these three mean the same thing. In this case, right, because, and I say that because shalom, right, is more like peace be unto you, like that kind of, but let's just say they all mean hello, for example's sake, and you only understand English. That's all you need, because then you're like, okay, then hola must also mean hello, and shalom must also mean hello. So now I know how to say hello in Spanish, and I know how to say hello in Hebrew, because all three of these say the same thing, just in different languages, and I just so happen to know one of those languages. So now whenever I see any Spanish text, if I see the word hola, I can now understand that that translates to hello. And this is sort of like the concept, right? Obviously in much more intricate detail and extensive research combined with this, but on a high level, this is sort of the concept that is used to understand, okay, now we can slowly but surely translate the hieroglyphs into Greek, because we know how to learn hieroglyphic or Demotic based on Greek because of this stone over here. And once we get good enough at understanding the Egyptian hieroglyphs, we might have found another archaeological stone that might have Egyptian hieroglyphs on one side, and then maybe, another ancient text on the other side. Then, having known a bit of Egyptian hieroglyphs, I can use that to help me understand the other ancient text. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. But the point is, by using modern languages and their ancient counterparts, you're able to go further and further back in time, to learn and understand and translate some of these older ancient texts here. And a great deal of it, like I said, is still based on extensive research, cross-referencing, assumptions, right? But bringing us back to this actual inscription by Tiglath-Pileser III. So King Hoshea is also attested in the royal inscriptions of the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III. Summary inscription number 4 was discovered on a large pavement stone by Austin Henry Layard during excavations at Kala. So that means they went there, did some digging, found this stone, saw this inscription on the stone, translated the inscription and said, oh wow, okay, this is a really old stone that dates back to X, Y, and Z, and it's talking about X, Y, and Z. So somebody who lived during this time period had this written down, inscribed, and over time it got, it was buried in here and we found it. So that is telling you that somebody existed a very long time ago and wrote these things down. That's not made up, that's not man-made, right? You can't say, oh, somebody ran and wrote that, right? This is like how they try to say for the Bible. So when you have this physical proof here that then validates or backs up what's written in the Bible, then it's harder for you to make that claim and say, the Bible was written by man, that means it's invalid. I mean, you read manuals, right? They're written by man, but they're pretty valid. Anyway, so let's read this. The land of, actually it says he made paper squeezes of the inscription, which were subsequently lost. Thankfully, the inscription had already been copied by George Smith, and this is what the inscription reads. Summary inscription number 4. The land of Bit Humria, literally Omri land, that is Israel. All of its people to Assyria I carried off. Pekah, their king, I/they killed, and Hoshea as king I appointed over them. This affirms the biblical description of Hoshea usurping the throne when Tiglath-Pileser III attacked Israel, 2 Kings 15 and 29. We read, right, in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and captured Ijon, Abel Beth Maacah, Janoah, Kedesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried the people captive to Assyria. And then it goes on, so on and so forth. We read that already, right? So here you have some more information here supporting and backing up that Hoshea, right, and the account we're reading of in the book of Kings. And lastly, let's deal with the topic that we just read concerning Shalmaneser V and Hoshea. So according to the biblical text, Hoshea initially paid tribute to the new Assyrian king, Shalmaneser V. And in 2 Kings 17 and 3, right, it says that. It says, against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. That's that tribute. However, he revolted and turned to So, king of Egypt, possibly Pharaoh Osorkon IV, for support. And that's what we read in 2 Kings 17 and 4 about conspiracy being found in Hoshea for having sent messengers to So. So they were planning like a revolt or something. Hoshea's actions brought swift retribution as Shalmaneser marched to Israel, laid siege to Samaria for 3 years, eventually taking the Israelite king as prisoner and deporting the Israelites to Assyria. Thus, the biblical record attributes the fall of Samaria to Shalmaneser V. This is supported by the Babylonian Chronicle ABC 1, BM 92502, which records, on the 25th of the month Tebetu, Salmaneser in Assyria and Akkad ascended the throne. He ravaged Samaria. The eponym chronicle for Shalmaneser's reign is, unfortunately, badly damaged and incomplete. It does seem to indicate in the years 725, 724, and 723 BC, he engaged in a campaign somewhere, but the enemy's name/location is missing. These 3 years may coincide with the 3 years in the Bible records Shalmaneser was laying siege to Samaria. And numerous scholars have proposed that Samaria is the missing location. Basically, there's an eponym, right? There's this chronicle about Shalmaneser's campaign. They're saying in the years 725, 724, and 723, he was in a campaign. But the part that mentions where and who he was going against, they couldn't find that. It was missing. So the inference here is that this coincides with the Bible's records of when he was laying siege to Samaria. So though it's not explicitly said in that chronicle, it is assumed, it is inferred or assumed based on that matching with biblical records and also the Babylonian Chronicle. Shalmaneser reigned for only 5 years before he died, and Sargon ascended the throne. So now let's go back to the book of 2 Kings, continuing from verse 5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years, as we just read. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria. So meaning in the 6th year of Hoshea, Shalmaneser V came and besieged Israel. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. And that was that deportation out of their land. For so it was that the children of Israel sinned, or had sinned against the Lord Yahweh their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord Yahweh cast out from before the children of Israel. And of the kings of Israel, which they had made, right? So these Israelites were brought up out of the land because they were deported out of their land because they sinned against the Lord. Verse 9, and the children of Israel did secretly those things which were not right against the Lord Yahweh their God. And they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. So that's those high places are going into, as we're about to read here, right? Setting up altars, shrines, and so on and so forth, where they would, verse 10, and they set them up images, idols, and groves, places of worship, right? In every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen whom the Lord Yahweh carried away before them, right? Which were the families of the Canaanites that the Lord used us to drive out of the land. Well, Israel started doing the same things they were doing, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord Yahweh to anger. For they served idols, whereof the Lord Yahweh had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks like to the necks of their fathers, and did not believe in the Lord Yahweh their God. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them, and they followed vanity, and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them. And what does that mean? Right? They started to adopt the ways of the heathens around about them. They started learning the customs of them, learning especially the rituals and the ways of serving the gods of the heathens round about them, concerning whom the Lord Yahweh had charged them, that they should not do like them. In fact, some of the laws that are in the Torah are explicitly written as a law to deter Israel from following the ways of the heathen. And they left all the commandments of the Lord Yahweh their God, and made them molten images, which are, you can imagine having a bunch of silver or gold and melting it, and then molding it into an idol. Even two calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. And guess what? That's what this guy did. Jeroboam made those golden calves, and then said, These are the gods that brought you out of Egypt. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments. Now, causing their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire is actually literal. It's a fire sacrifice. Okay. There's an example. It was an old video that I saw, but the depiction is they had a giant statue of an owl or Molech, and within the mouth of the statue being opened, there would be fire. It'd be like a furnace, and you would hear these babies screaming and crying and all of that, and they would just be tossing their babies into the fire, literally, and having them burnt. And then you would have loud music and singing and chanting right in the background to drown out the sound of the crying and screaming babies there. But it was a very demonic and evil thing to do, just to give you a visual in your head when you hear about causing their sons to pass and their daughters to pass through the fire. Yeah, it's written as words, but the actual visual of it is pretty horrific and disgusting and and demonic. So it was a big deal what they were doing there, right? And used divination and enchantment. And divination is basically the there's different forms of it, right? But it's like fortune telling or looking into the future, right? And there's different ways. There's forms of, I think one of them is called scrying or scrying, which is pretty much where you use the, like a glass or a reflective surface. It could even be water, and through certain rites and rituals, they would be able to see things of the future. And there were some, or like auspices, right, where you had I think the Romans had this one where I forget the term for it. It was like augur or something like that. But basically, they would sacrifice a goat or an animal, and then they would look at its entrails, like its liver, its organs, and then they would look in that and use that to tell them the future as to what's going to happen. Similarly, you could use the stars, the constellations. These were all different methods or forms of divination, basically to tell the future based on certain signs. And then you have enchantments, right, which is like spells, like manipulation of people, casting spells on others, and so on. So they did all these things, right? Israelites, that is. And sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh to provoke him to anger. And selling themselves to do mischief or to do evil, meaning they set their minds to fully do this. This is like their full-time job, so to speak, which is to go in the ways of evil and really get down into it. And of course, it provoked the Lord to anger. Therefore, the Lord Yahweh was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. And that's the manifestation of this, was the Lord bringing the Assyrians and having them deport Israel out of the land. Now, when it says there was none left by the tribe of Judah only, it's actually referring collectively to Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right? It says tribe, but it's really referring to those three. How do we know that? Well, here's an example, right? When the Babylonians came and they besieged Jerusalem, it wasn't only Judites, right, that were then taken captive. How do we know that? Well, just think about this. You had the Babylonians, they came up into power, they fell to the Persians. When Cyrus came into power, he allowed Israelites to return back to their land and to rebuild the temple and then the wall and so on, right? Which then leads into the time of Nehemiah and so on. But guess what? You know who else was a Persian? Ahasuerus. And during the time of Ahasuerus, you had Mordecai and you had Esther. And if I remember correctly, I believe Mordecai was actually a Benjamite, right? And I believe Esther as well. So let me actually confirm that here. Let's see. What tribe was Mordecai? Yep, he was from the tribe of Benjamin. And it mentions that in the book of Esther, either in the book of Esther or in the book of the editions of Esther in the Apocrypha. So how then are the tribe of Benjamin over here, right? Because the tribe of Judah only that were left in the land was collectively Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Also, Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord Yahweh their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. And the Lord Yahweh rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers. The spoilers here being the other nations. And so all the seed here, meaning both northern and southern, right? The Lord ultimately said, get them up out of here. Until he had cast them out of his sight, hence we got taken out of the land. For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord Yahweh, and made them sin a great sin. And that was the worshiping of idols, specifically those golden calves. And it was such a grave sin that all throughout the book of Kings, the subsequent kings were compared to Jeroboam. Such and such did evil, and went in the ways of Jeroboam, right? Verse 22. For the children of Israel walked in all their sins, or all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did, they departed not from them, until the Lord Yahweh removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land onto Assyria onto this day. And at this point, Isaiah was also there on the scene. He wasn't taken into Assyria, but he was on the scene. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So at this point, you had heathens that were put into the land of the northern kingdom, the territories of the northern kingdom. This, there's no record of those heathens now being driven out. So from this point on into the future, right, during the time of the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, right, the time of the book of the Maccabees, all that, you still had heathens that were dwelling in Samaria and in those neighboring regions, because at that point the northern kingdom had come to the Americas. So within the southern part, where you had Judah, right, Benjamin, that land, the southern kingdom was there, but right next to them and above were heathens. And as we're about to read, these heathens, having first been brought into this land, did not keep the customs and the manners of the land. There were certain things that they didn't do in terms of fearing the Lord while they were in the land, and it worked against them. And they were basically forced to do, at the very least, the bare minimum to appease the Lord while they dwelt in the land, so they could continue to dwell there. And that is what ends up manifesting later on in the New Testament, to where you had some of these heathens here, after being taught the ways of the Israelites in serving the Lord, they ended up thinking that they were a part of it. And an example in particular is when you go to the book of John, the 4th chapter, when Yahushua speaks to the Samaritan woman at the well. Guess what? If you look up here, Samaria, or let's say land of Israel, Old and New Testament map. Cool. Let's take this and see. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. I'll pull up two separate images. So we'll say land of Israel map. Okay, I think this should suffice for one of them. Zoom in here a bit. And now let's look up land of Israel, New Testament map. Let's go to images on there. Okay, let's go with this one. This one's not bad. Cool. So as you see here between the two, the land is pretty much the same land, but the way it's broken up and divided and the names, they change when you come into the New Testament, right? You now have Samaria, which is a big dedicated portion here, Galilee up here, Decapolis, Perea, Judea down here, and so on, right? Guess what? Samaria is still in the same location. And so these heathens that were put in this land, guess what? They were basically still there. And so coming back into the New Testament during the time of like Yahushua in John the 4th chapter, that's why the lady said, the woman, let's get that real quick. John 4. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So in verse 19, now this woman was not an Israelite, but she was speaking to the Lord, right? And this is what she said, verse 19. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Yahushua saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. Because going back to the time when you were put in the land and taught those ways, that's not your custom. That's not your God. You did that. Your forefathers did it because that was the only way they could survive in the land. Right? So the belief you have now, you don't even know where it goes back to or the truth of the matter. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So he made a distinction there. Okay, now why did she say our fathers worshipped in this mountain? And why did she question him to say our fathers worshipped in this mountain, but you're saying that Jerusalem is where men ought to worship? And even when you go back up, she mentions here, let me see, right? Verse 12, art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well and drank thereof himself and his children and his cattle. So when we go back here, you notice there's a part here called Mount Gerizim, and I actually want to look this up. My memory on this is a bit hazy, but let's see if I can find it here. There was a temple, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's written in the book of Josephus that there's actually a temple that was built. There we go. Let me see. Okay. Mount Gerizim is sacred to the Samaritans, who regarded rather than Jerusalem's Temple Mount as the location chosen by God for a holy temple. In Samaritan tradition, it is the oldest and most central mountain in the world, towering above the Great Flood. That's in their tradition, and providing the first land for Noah's disembarkation. It is the location where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac. A Samaritan temple was located on Mount Gerizim from the 5th century BCE to the 2nd century BCE. That's around the 400s to about 100 or so BC. So that encompasses during the time of the reign of somewhere around the time of the Persians, right? To throughout the Greek rulership, right, all the way down, getting close to like the Roman rulership. On the Jews, on the other hand, considered the location of the near sacrifice to be Mount Moriah, traditionally identified by them with the Temple Mount. Mount Gerizim continues to be the center of Samaritan religion, and Samaritans ascend it 3 times a year: at Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, right? And these relate back to those 3 in the book of Leviticus. The 3 times a year you're going to come in and serve the Lord. Passover is still celebrated by the Samaritans with a lamb sacrifice on Mount Gerizim. Let's take a look here at this Samaritan temple. So the mount, but why now did you have the Samaritans? This is a very similar worshiping or belief to that of the Jews. Where did that originate from? Why? So the Mount Gerizim temple was an ancient Samaritan center of worship located on Mount Gerizim. Cool. We read this. The temple was attested in several historical sources, both literary and epigraphical, including references in 2nd Maccabees from the 2nd century BCE and 2 Greek inscriptions found on the island Delos, also dating to the same period. Here we go, which mention a sanctuary on the mountain. Additionally, the 1st century CE historian Josephus provides an account on the temple's founding, though inaccurately dated, and its eventual destruction by Hasmonean leader John Hyrcanus. So, and that was the part that I was mentioning about, here we go. It's actually here. According to Josephus, the temple resembled the temple in Jerusalem. And I'm trying to see if he says anything else. Excavations revealed thousands of coins and hundreds of inscriptions in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Okay, that's cool. Let me pull up one more piece of information here. Let's see. Mount Gerizim temple Josephus account. Yep. Right, it says here, Mount Gerizim, right, according to Josephus. According to the Jewish historian Josephus, the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim was built in the 4th century BCE and was similar to the temple in Jerusalem. Down here it tells you that the temple in Jerusalem was built at first by Solomon, but the one imitated by the Samaritans was probably the one rebuilt by Nehemiah in the 5th century. Well, I don't think that's the case here, right? But this is somebody from whatever this site is. But we know that's not the case, right? The temple that was built, in fact, Nehemiah didn't rebuild the temple, he built the walls, right? He had the walls be rebuilt. The temple was rebuilt by Zerubbabel and Joshua, the high priest, right, during that time, ending around the time of Darius. So that needs to be checked over there. Let's see. Here it is. This is if you have the book of Josephus, or you want to get it, or maybe if you want to look it up, this is where you can find it. The Antiquities, I think it's Antiquities of the Jews, as it is titled, and this is where you can find it here. It says, Josephus says that the Samaritan leader Sanballat, there you go, promised to build the temple during Alexander the Great's conquest of Israel. Yeah, that's the account that I remember. Anyway, there's some information for you, and tying it all back into the point being, as we're reading here in 2 Kings 17. Let me read a couple verses more, and then we can tie the whole point back in. So in the 24th verse, we see that these heathens were now imported and put into the land of Samaria, right, in the neighboring cities where the northern kingdom used to dwell. Verse 25, and so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not the Lord Yahweh. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. So these heathens coming into the land, they were just doing whatever. But there are laws of the land, and there are things that you have to do in terms of, like I called it, the bare minimum to avoid that kind of judgment coming on your back from the Lord. And so when they came in there, they weren't doing that. It was like a free-for-all, and so the Lord started messing them up by sending lions among them. Now, today, it's not really the case, but in the ancient world, around the Jordan River and so on, you had lions, right? Asiatic lions, as they refer to, I pulled it up on here, and bears that used to dwell around there. Okay, and that's why you have the account of David slaying that lion, the account of Samson slaying the lion, right? The account of Elisha calling the 2 she-bears. These animals were there around that time. So here, if you look up Asiatic lions, it says here they were native to ancient Israel and the surrounding region. They were a major predator in the area and are often mentioned in the Bible. And like it says, they found some bones of these kinds of lions in different locations over there in Israel. Okay, so how did the lions pop up? They didn't just magically manifest. At this time, they were actually over there. Anyway, verse 26. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations which thou hast removed and placed in the cities of Samaria know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. So because they don't know the ways of the Lord and the laws of the land, the Lord is sending lions and judging them, because they keep going off. So they complained unto the king of Assyria, verse 27. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the God of the land. Now remember, Yes, the southern kingdom was collectively Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, but it doesn't mean that all the Levites were, not one existed in the northern kingdom, right? Similar to how you had sprinkles of northern kingdom in the southern kingdom. So they ended up taking one of the priests, right, which would be a Levite, and brought him to the land to basically teach them, verse 28. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how they should fear the Lord Yahweh. Right, so he taught them the things that they should know. This is what you should do. This is what you should not do, so that to some degree you can avoid that judgment. Even though they were still heathens, right? And this that they were taught is what ends up leading into that, in process of time, we are the servants of the Lord. We also serve the Lord like you do. We also follow his ways. They ended up building that temple to the Lord and basically, try to play takeover, right? Anyway, verse 29, albeit every nation made gods of their own and put them in the houses of the high places, which the Samaritans had made. Every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made Succoth Benoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire to Adremelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. So they feared the Lord Yahweh and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared Yahweh and served their own gods after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. So they followed the ways of the Lord, right, to a certain degree, but they also served their own gods, so that they just wouldn't be torn up by the lions. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord Yahweh, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment, which the Lord Yahweh commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom the Lord Yahweh had made a covenant, and charged them, saying, Ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But the Lord Yahweh, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, him shall ye fear, and him shall ye worship, and to him shall ye do sacrifice. And the statutes and the ordinances and the law and the commandments which he wrote for you, ye shall observe to do forevermore, and ye shall not fear other gods. And the covenant that I have made with you, ye shall not forget, neither shall ye fear other gods. But the Lord Yahweh your God shall ye fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. Howbeit they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. Hence they got taken out of the land. So these nations feared the Lord Yahweh, and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they on to this day. Hence all the other context that I gave earlier leading up into the future. So there was a lot that we went through in this chapter, but Lord willing, it was edifying unto the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.